Hi everybody, it's me, Beth Maitland from Drama Queen Bee Quilts, and we're gonna make something interesting today. I'm kind of getting away from a project-based tutorial, and we're going to spend a little time making these beautiful little elements. This could be an embellishment that you layer on a fabric journal. This could turn into a little necklace if you put that on a foundation of quilt, for example, and make an amulet out of it. They could turn into greeting cards if you were to finish this and then glue it onto a greeting card as a little fabric decoration, the highlight of the face of the card. We're going to make little hearts today, and we don't need a lot of complicated materials. Everything I need is laying right here, and I made these in advance on my sewing machine, but we're going to make them by hand today. If you look closely, I have taken a square of linen that I've torn the edges off of, and then I've peeled away all of the little fraying pieces and kept them right here because we're going to use that for stuffing in a minute. Then I've taken a smaller piece and layered it on top with a little bit of batting behind. Let's see if we can find one where you can actually see some of the batting. And the batting adds a little bit of textural element. And then over the top, this is a wool blanket, just a scrap of wool blanketing that I cut into the shape of a heart, and then used pearl cotton to do a little embroidery around the outside. This is just quilter's cotton in a scrap that I felt was complementary to the pink bits. And this is also pearl cotton, but in a different colorway, a little more cool and greens primarily. And it's literally 2 stitches of embroidery. It's lazy daisy stitch and bullion knots, and that's it. This is bullion knots and bullion stitch and some lazy daisies. Three stitches, and you make a beautiful little decorative element. This one has some X's, some crosses, and I went across the heart and around the edges. Again, lazy daisy stitch, bullion knots, and X's, and that's it. On this one too, you'll see a few little X's. Lazy daisy stitch and bullion knot. So literally some very basic embroidery stitches, some just colorful variegated yarns, a little bit of quilting cotton, and a few scraps, and you have these beautiful decorative elements. The one we're going to make by hand is we're going to use a little scrap of velvet. I'm making a pincushion. A friend of mine, Myra, we were at the antique fair mall. We were at the antique mall after lunch the other day, and these are little egg cups that were for sale for like $2 or something. And she asked me, I handled them and thought, oh, that would make the best pincushion, and put it back down. She goes, are you going to get those? And I said no. So she bought both of them and gave me one. The reason I said no is that I'm getting ready to leave for Australia, and a couple of days with the Roxy Journal of Stitchery girls, taking a couple of days course making fabric books. Can't wait. And so I didn't have time to make a lot of projects before I go, but I am taking a little stock of detailed elements to add to any projects we end up working on. So she gifted me one. So I'm using this velvet, and I'm going to make that a ball stuffed on the top and then embellish with 3-dimensional velvet roses. Maybe that's a video for another day. So we're going to take a little tiny corner. Let's put these in here and get them out of the way. We're going to take this, just a little corner of this, to make our heart. I made a few of these on the sewing machine. Here's one you can see is a little more puffy. Just tore a bunch of scraps and did a whole stack of them all at one time. And here is our little orts, they call them, random threads, that we're going to use to stuff the heart and make it a little fluffier. And then here's my scraps. This is the background piece. Here's a little scrap of batting. We can make this top piece a different color if we want to. Or here's the little strip that I used to tear the smaller pieces from. And then we're going to make our heart out of this. So let's get started. Let's see. Let's start with our layering. we'll use that one. Actually, that one's fatter. We'll use that one. I think with the velvet and the texture, I think I'll just go along with the double layer of the same color. And so I just kind of put that on there and figured out what was, just eyeball it, took a little snip, took a little tear, and took a few of the threads off the end and put them in our stuffing stack and put that on there as sort of an audition, and that's just going to be perfect. And then I took my batting scrap, just cut-offs from the end of a quilt or whatever other project, and just eyeballed it, just rough cut it out to about the same size as, and we can cut this down when we get it all worked out. Just eyeball it. None of this is supposed to be stressful. This is just a little quick project to get us slow stitching. Let's see, let me trim that up just a tiny bit. And we'll put that in our stuffing pile. I think that'll work just fine. And now, because we're using this gold, I think, oh, let's use this colorful one. This is pretty. I think I'll sew this down to this with just some running stitches with this pretty variegated floss. This is Wonderfill size 8 pearl cotton. And it's just a really pretty sort of meadow color. I think I used it actually in this one. This variegated, beautiful sort of, it's almost a little shiny. There's a little sheen to it. I just loved it. Okay. I'm using a tapestry needle with a sharp end. It is not entirely blunt. I guess this might be a chenille then, if it's got a little bit of a sharp end. Tapestry needles are generally for wool work, for needlepoint, and consequently have a blunt end. And in class, I find people really resist the blunt end, but going through even a layer of linen, batting and linen, it's going to be okay. I love to use tapestry needles because I poke myself every single day that I sew. And I find that, I joked about this the other day, my DNA is on every single project I make because I bleed on everything. And so I don't mind the blunt needle because I always forget my thimble. I use leather thimbles is my favorite. And there we go. I'm going to put a little bit bigger knot there. Okay. So our knot's secure. Anyway, so it keeps me from stabbing myself and bleeding too much. So we've got our layers. And we're just gonna hand stitch through all 3 layers. It doesn't matter if a little bit of the batting peeks out, or it just doesn't matter. These I sewed with white thread, like cream colored thread on the sewing machine, just because I was down there doing other work in the studio. I just made a bunch of them to have handy. But the purpose of making this all by hand with you is to show you this can be a slow stitching project that is very satisfying, to just sit with a few scraps in your favorite chair, light a candle, turn on music, turn on your favorite books on tape, or maybe the background noise of a TV show that you like that you're binging, or a movie that you had in the queue on your streaming service or whatever. And we're just doing a running stitch in and out, and we're going all the way through all 3 layers as much as possible. Some people like to go through all 3 layers and back up again. I like to just, like sashiko style stitching, I like to sew several stitches, whoopsie, in, out, whoops, in, out, in, out, in, out, and several stitches all at once. Push it down and then pull it all the way through. And it takes a little bit more strength, but that's just my habit. That's what I've always done with cantha stitching and this sort of outline running stitch. And I want to show you, this is not perfect. These are not even straight lines, and it doesn't matter. That's the point. It actually will look kind of even better with a little bit of sort of rustic or primitive feel to our project when we're done. And the other secret that I love is variegated thread. I love that this variegated thread does all the work of changing color, different shades. You can use variegated thread as a real time saver and interest maker, because you don't have to keep changing threads to get a variation in the way that you're working. I love that I got all of these colors. I got peach, blue, purple, like a lavendery purple, yellow, all without changing thread. I did change thread for the green, for the leaves. That was this one, and also variegated, by the way. But I did add the leaf color, but literally this is just 2 colors of thread, the variegated and the variegated green. So you get a lot of dimension and interest from using variegated thread. I love it. And Wonderfill is a good favorite. I find it accessible. There are other favorite threads that I use, but today we're going to just experiment working with this one some more on these little projects. And again, doesn't have to be perfect, just simple running stitches. Now, you'll see on the sewing machine, this doesn't show, so it's not even part of the design element. It's just the texture of the layers and the batting and making it more permanent. But look how this is already part of our design element, is getting these colors of threads, the shape and texture of the stitching, in, out, in, out. It doesn't have to be a perfect line. It doesn't have to be even straight. The stitches don't have to be regulated, and actually it is more interesting and, like I said, rustic and primitive looking if they don't match perfectly. So we'll just do a couple more. I'm going to cross over and go back down. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, and do whatever you like to do, but that's our layers all together in just a couple of minutes. Now I'm going to tie this off, because we're not quite sure. I'm going to use the gold the gold variegated to sew down our heart. So I am going to just tie that off. And again, this is probably going to be either glued or sewn down on top of something. So we want to tie it off so it doesn't fray, but it's not to be worn and laundered. So you don't have to worry too much about making sure that all of these threads are secured. Now we'll take a little corner of our velvet, and looking at that for reference, we only probably need about this much. Look at how tiny these scraps are, that we can make our whole project out of little tiny scraps under 3 inches square. That's really all we need, literally. That's going to be our heart. So I'm going to just do all of this, continue to do this all just kind of freehand. I'm going to fold these on top of each other and just cut it. I'm just going to try to make a little tiny heart, like you would do when remember in elementary school when we were making our Valentine's gift cards for our moms in elementary school. Let's see how that worked. Here's our little heart. That'll do. I think I might come in a little bit, make it a little bit deeper. There, that's good. And we'll put this in our scrap bin. That might be stuffing. And now this is rayon silk velvet, my favorite thing to work with. And it is probably going to fray a little bit, and a little fluff is going to come out when we're sewing this down to our other piece. And it probably will be a little more difficult to work with than felted wool blanket, or even our quilting cotton. These frayed a little bit, but I sewed them down with the machine, and I just went slow and just sewed around the outside. But when we're doing this in hand stitches, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, so I'm going to pin it down. So where's our little piece? Do you want to do it on the diagonal? No, I think I like it still better up and down. We want to audition it. Does it look better that way, or does it look better that way? It also because these aren't perfect squares, what stitches peek out is part of our design as well. Let's see. I think I like it like that. So we'll put a little pin in there, sort of out of the way of most of where I'll have to sew. And if you are an EPP sewer, if you're a quilter that loves to do English paper piecing, or if you're an applique sewer and you want to do needle turn, then I would tuck in the sides and make, without having this rough outer edge, this loose frayed rough outer edge. If you want to turn that under with your needle and sew that down as like a seam, then I would recommend cutting your heart just a little bit bigger so you have room to tuck that under. But we're going to do all of ours just, let's see. And I think I wanted to sew that down with a sort of a variegated, this is gold and orange, yellow, cream. But I think that'll be pretty around the outer edge. And again, the outer edge is going to be just a running stitch all the way around the outside in maybe 1/8 of an inch from the cut edge. And the running stitch will hold everything down, and we will stuff it with some of our scrap orts, our little threads, toward the end. And the running stitch doesn't have to be tiny little stitches like the sewing machine version, because we're going to go back later and embroider our little design elements, little flowers, or French knots, or bullion knots, lazy daisy stitches, whatever we decide to do. We're going to go around that sewn line and sew it down even further with our embroidery elements. So pretty easy to just do the way we attached our layers, a cantha running stitch all the way around the outside, leaving, like I said, around 1/8 of an inch from the cut edge. And so how is everybody doing? I love this aspect of the new style of demonstration YouTube videos. I follow a lot of fantastic needle artists on YouTube, many Australian, many I'm going to meet next week. I'm really excited about my time with Sarah Roxburgh and Rachel Roxburgh and their mom Juju. We're going to meet the Roxy girls. I'm so excited. Anyway, I love Sherry Iris, use lots of her beautiful threads in a lot of my handwork. And all of these lovely ladies, Kate in the Nest, you probably follow her. She's hilariously madcap in her colors and overwhelming layers of embellishments and brights, and super fun to watch her videos and chit chats. And everybody wants to know how we're doing. I love that. This is the last day of a 3-day holiday in America here. We have celebrated 4th of July on Friday, our Independence Day. And my daughter came up for the day, and we had a lovely day. She has a favorite thing I barbecue. It's fajitas, chicken fajitas. So she requested that. So we did some cooking. We did some sewing. We did some packing. She's going with me on my trip to Australia for her 30th birthday. This is also celebrating her birthday, which will be so nice. We're going to do some adventuring also. We're going to go to, she's a bassoonist. She's a classical musician and plays in several orchestras. And so we're going to go to the beautiful Sydney Opera House for a Dvorak opera, The Little Mermaid. We're going to the botanical gardens. We're going to an outdoor nature experience, and we're going to cuddle quokkas. She's going diving. She's a scuba diver, and she's going to, I guess, cuttlefish are in season, and their faces look like, they're tentacled. They kind of look like squids or octopi. They have tentacles in the front part of their bodies, and they're apparently really interested and bright and great to interact with divers, with humans. And so she's going on a guided dive. That should be really fun for her. And we're going to do some, also there's some fabulous places around Sydney where we'll be staying most of the time, they have op shops, charity shops that are nothing but sewing supplies and vintage linens and threads and knitting and crocheting and all kinds of things like that. So we're going to go adventuring. Okay, so back to our project. I've stopped now, leaving a little bit of an opening, and I'm cutting up some of our threads to tuck inside. Now, I didn't bring it upstairs from the studio. I usually have a tool, pointed tool, that I use, a little sewing awl, to gently put my scraps down in and get into the loops of the heart and the point of the heart. My pen's not really working. Maybe I'll try something else. Be really careful if you use something sharp like I'm doing with your scissors. Be careful, because if you push too hard, you'll go right through the fabric and cause some damage to your fabric. I'll just be really careful. I want to work these threads into the arch of the one side of our heart. I want to work them down into the point. The whole idea is to create additional texture in 3D by using up some of our and the threads are really easy to manipulate, not as difficult as stuffing even to get in corners, because they have a little bit of body and texture, but they're so small that they just easily manipulate right where you need them. Now, if I had been thinking, I would have probably left my opening along the side and not over a loop, but I was so excited to start sewing that I didn't really think about it. So now I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to turn the edge of my velvet back out. Kind of got jammed down a little bit when I was stuffing it. And we're going to get that smooth again. And then I'm just going to sew up the rest of the opening. Again, just running stitches. And you can see that lots of texture with the beautiful, because it's velvet and it has that nap, it shows all kinds of, it catches the light and it shows all kinds of dimension and puffiness. And I think it's going to be just awesome when we're finished. So yeah, just a little running stitch to finish tacking down my heart. And again, it doesn't have to be tiny stitches. It can be easy to sew. Make it easy. None of this is supposed to be stressful. Our practice in slow stitching is to eliminate anxiety and eliminate stress. And so I'm just cutting away some of the little threads that are still sticking out. We don't want to sew those into our stitching. But you can trim all of that stuff up later if you need to. That's fine too. But we're just finishing up our tack down, and pesky things. When I sewed these on the machine, I did leave the opening on the side, and it was quick. But the idea is we want this to be part of our slow stitching practice. We want this to be something we can do sitting in our chair without a sewing machine, without a computerized, this is about relaxing and getting it out of our minds into our hands, not having to think too hard or too much about, gathering our thoughts or releasing our thoughts, daydreaming, just concentrating just enough on our project that we eliminate all of that stress of the day. So I am going to tie it off. Again, the back doesn't need to be fancy or perfect, and the back's going to be sewn down or glued down on whatever project we put these embellishes in. And these are not garments. These are not going to be laundered. So earlier I was talking about you don't have to hide the knot and you don't have to double secure it, and make sure that everything is super sewn down, because we're going to come back to that and it's going to get laundered and threads are going to come out brushed against jackets and our purse strap, things like that. So don't worry about any of that. These things do need to be secure, but they're not going to fray in the way that we're going to use it. So we'll tie that off. And now the next step is loading some embroidery thread and doing our decorations. You can decorate this any way you choose. I'm probably gonna add a button or two. The textures from the hand stitching are a little bit more interesting than the ones I sewed on machine. So I want to enhance that with what I choose. You can be as rustic as you wish, even 3 or 4 knots or stitches, maybe one button, some X's, whatever you choose to do. So I'm going to go off camera, I think, and I'm going to, I don't want this video to get too long. I'm going to do the embellishment. It'll probably be another 15 or 20 minutes or something of sewing things down. And then I'll come back and show you at the end what our finished project looks like. But this is basically the construction of these sweet little hearts, and then use your slow stitching practice time to figure out whatever embellishes suit. So, yeah, I'll be right back in just a second, and I'll show you how we ended all of this. I'm going to do some stitching with that variegated floss, and I'm probably going to use the green and put in some leaves and maybe a button, a little antique button. I have a whole big giant jar of vintage buttons all in cream. Some of them are mother of pearl, some of them are Bakelite, some of them are just plastic, but they're all different sizes. But yeah, I think that variegated floss and the green, and nope, I'm not going to use the gold. Okay, as you can see in this sample, I think I'm going to do the same sort of thing. I'm going to go around the outside with just some French knots, bullion knots. In this wool blanketing, the solid background, like the gold will be, really picked up the color. So because there's nap, because there's just a solid color of gold, I think I will do something pretty simple. And this is how we ended up. I added a button. I sewed some French knots on the top of the button after sewing it on. I did little clusters of 2 or 3 French knots, and then came back with some lazy daisy leaves. And I just love it. I hope you did too. I hope you'll make something beautiful today. Thank you for joining me. It's Beth Maitland from Drama Queen Bee Quilts.